This is Twit.
The last 48 hours have been kind of mayhem for tech news and Huawei. And it's a developing story. It's been changing all over the place. So I thought I'd start off with kind of a little bit of a summary because we just to catch everybody up to speed for the last 48 hours. And actually it dates back to last week when there was an executive order issued to block U.S. companies like Huawei, who the U.S. says poses a national security risk from doing business in the U.S. In any way, shape, or form. And that executive order, from my understanding, more has to do with this like historical kind of perspective on Huawei and its networking equipment specifically, not their phones. So for the purposes of this show, I don't know how much of that involvement is related to the phones. But on Sunday, Google announced it was going to sever Huawei's Android license in compliance with that order. So I don't believe that that's Google being like bad guy Google. That's Google following the law in the U.S. essentially. And that would restrict in essence, Huawei to AOSP, so they wouldn't be able to, have the Google Play Store on there, no Google services, Google security updates on future Huawei devices. However, existing devices would not be affected by that. And everyone's going, oh my goodness, Huawei is doomed. And meanwhile, they've just had this crazy trajectory, right? They've been selling smartphones, selling handsets like crazy worldwide. Vlad Savov on The Verge said their phone business would be, quote, decimated without Google's Android, which is probably pretty close to accurate as far as that's concerned. On Monday, the U.S. Commerce Department announced a 90-day license for U.S. companies to continue work with Huawei. Possible extension beyond that. I don't think it's a full license, free and clear, but it's a partial. And as a result, Google announced that it would once again provide OS updates and security patches to existing Huawei devices during this temporary license period. Still plans to hold its apps and services from future devices. And that, I think, is where we're at right now. But I feel like every hour there's a new post that's like, oh, no, now what? Stephen, you actually wrote about Huawei's use of AOSP being anything but a sure thing. And it relates to copyright. And I think this is a really interesting perspective. So why don't you kind of give your take on why Huawei might not be able to use AOSP going forward?
Yeah, so, I mean, the first reaction that a lot of people seem to have to the announcement about not being able to use Android and Android branding was that they would just use AOSP going forward. But being on the entity list and being subject to the export regulations EAR, I can't remember the actual words for it, it blocks any U.S. company from entering into a contract with you to supply parts, including software parts, such as, well, obviously Android, but AOSP as well. AOSP is able to be used because it's offered as under a license, the Apache license, and that license is an agreement that they have to enter into. If they cannot enter into the Apache licensing agreement, then they can't use AOSP itself, as it would be copyright infringement. Now, obviously, Google's not going to pursue that. They have no interest in pursuing that. It would be a huge waste of their time to pursue that. But at the same time, there are criminal penalties for massive copyright infringement, which Huawei would be doing if they were to distribute Android in, worldwide without a license to use it. And those criminal penalties could be pursued by the U.S. government directly without Google's help itself. So there actually is substantial potential for, if someone wanted to take it to that level, which hopefully it doesn't go that far, there is substantial potential for Huawei to be pursued for the use of AOSP without a license. But on the upside, there actually is some precedence that it may not go that path, and this whole dispute may end sooner than we expect. Specifically, ZTE. Just 3 years ago, there was a bit of a similar situation happening. Mm-hmm. And the article I published today, actually I almost published a very similar article 2 years ago, but it didn't get around to writing it. And essentially, yes, they got a 3-month reprieve right now, but 3 years ago, ZTE, when they were blocked, got a 3-month reprieve that was extended for another 3 months for compliance, and then another 3 months, and another 3 months, and another 3 months, until eventually they were taken off the list after paying some substantial fines, and were allowed to do business again, and now are entering Western markets again with full Android devices.
And you're positing that might actually happen with Huawei too, which it possibly, it absolutely could. I feel like there's a certain kind of political strength happening right now. A confluence of events between this and, of course, Chinese tariffs that are also related and happening in tandem with this. It's not impossible that something like that would happen, but man, that feels somewhat impossible, I suppose.
It's a horrifying position to be in. No one wants to be on the entity list. It's if you're on the entity list and don't get exemptions and don't get taken off, it's pretty much a death sentence to a business. The Commerce Department understands that. They know that it's a death sentence if you get left on with no provisions, and they readily work with companies to try and prevent that from happening as long as the company tries to comply. So as long as assuming nothing out of the ordinary happens, I wouldn't be surprised if Huawei and the Commerce Department kept announcing ongoing agreements to continue to work together until a permanent agreement can be found, essentially.
Yeah. So let's open it up. Obviously, Michael, Ron, I'm very curious to hear what you guys think about this. Michael, where are you at right now?
The ZTE example is a really good one. I was speculating in that vein yesterday. Well, ZTE was essentially destroyed as a company, and they were able to come back from that after a series of reversals that Stephen already went over. I mean, my thing was I just couldn't get out of my own head for yesterday when I was trying to process this news in terms of how much Huawei has brought to the mobile space, how much innovation they're responsible for. And innovation even, I mean, you can't say any words in this discussion without somebody getting inflamed. There's all kinds of patriotic and nationalistic distractions occurring as a result of this being a symptom of a trade war. But if you just look at what Huawei has brought to the space, the mobile space, I mean, in smartphone cameras alone, they've exerted immense pressure on other manufacturers to up their game. The materials science, even the color of their devices, reverse wireless charging. You take a look at their MateBook Pro, it's one of the best Windows laptops there is, and that has an innovative way of talking to smartphones with something as simple as an NFC tag, but it's implemented so well that I made a whole video about it. Like, this is a company that makes impressive stuff. Say what you will about, the company's connections to the Chinese government, itself. These are products the Android ecosystem should not be without. And so I really hope, just for the sake of that ecosystem, that this gets worked out sooner rather than later.
Ron, what do you think?
I don't know. This whole thing is just crazy and complicated. But looking at some of the Jason, you made the comment about how things are. It seems like every hour there's a new article or a new story or something like that. And seeing the Huawei CEO post today on WeChat that they're going to roll out their own operating system in 2020 is I think that Huawei's they're going to take this on the chin and roll on. And to Michael's point, I think they're an innovative company, and they'll continue to innovate, and they'll figure out a way to innovate around the U.S. if needed, and innovate around Android. I think of all the companies that we've seen emerge and stuff like that, I think Huawei is the one that could do that.
Samsung has tried to do their own OS with Tizen, and that just ended up being relegated to a thing in smaller devices and on your wrist. But I feel like Samsung could have done this, but they weren't able to pull it off.
You see, but Samsung had the right idea at the wrong time. Right, Tizen was how many years now? What is that? 7 years, right?
More than
Think
that.
About how
15.
Yeah, 15 years ago. Think about where the devices are now, and where the supply chain in China is like, and how far we've all come. And basically, could you you want to roll the specs for a mobile operating system? You don't need to build it from the ground up 15 years ago anymore. You can just reverse engineer Android. You already know what the UI. You already know what the way, basically the ins and outs and how it can work and everything. You just got to do it. I think that it's a much better environment to roll your own OS now than it was when Samsung was trying to make Tizen work.
Yeah, yeah.
So one of the things that was announced actually has me a little worried for Huawei. They announced Android app compatibility, which if they were just targeting APIs a couple years ago would be potentially doable. But with the recent Oracle ruling that ruled that APIs are copyrightable, they could potentially find themselves in trouble with AOSP, even if they're using a completely fresh code base that just happens to be targeting the same APIs.
Yeah.
I have no knowledge of what the actual OS looks like. This is purely speculation based on what has been announced so far, but it's got me a little worried.
Yeah, and they've been working on their own OS. Apparently, the internal name on it is Project Z. They've been working on that for years now. The Information had a post where they said that their sources were saying this OS is, quote, far from ready, and I don't know what that is, if that is 2020 or not. But it sounds like it's not ready to go right now, which might be what Huawei actually needs.
But what do you? So if the CEO is saying it's going to be ready in 2020, and if right now it's not ready, it's May. And what is the thing that you would need to get it ready by 2020? Motivation.
Well, that's true,
right? And yes, good point. But but the U.S. government is basically motivating Huawei to speed that up and to throw all their resources at it. And in 6 months' time, can they do it? I don't know. I guess we'll find out. He didn't say when in 2020.
Right.
He didn't say it was January.
December 31st, 2020.
Yeah.
That's the thing,
beta version.
As appreciative as I am of Huawei's hardware prowess, and I am, I've never been impressed with the company's abilities with software. Certainly, there's some great ideas baked into the versions of Android Huawei has built, but they're seldom executed properly, and it seems to take them a long time to innovate. They do fix stuff, but it seems to take them to iterate, not innovate. So that combined with the fact that even if they figure out a way to emulate, Android apps or whatever, modify Android apps to run on this Project Z stuff, and they're legally allowed to, we don't have an example in history of a company that succeeded trying to do that. Yeah. BlackBerry tried to do it on BlackBerry 10. Microsoft was in the middle of trying to do it. I think Sailfish does it, but they didn't have a significant market share. So it's like, I don't know. I would be very surprised if they were able to easily innovate around this problem. I think there's no way forward for them without Android.